The fork felt heavy in his hand. Robert Chen stared at the perfectly plated veal in front of him, watching the steam rise and disappear into the warm restaurant air. All around him, families were laughing. Couples were holding hands across tables. Groups of friends were toasting with wine glasses, their faces bright with joy. And there he sat, alone in the corner booth, with nothing but his phone and a meal that suddenly seemed impossible to eat. It was Christmas Eve, the one night of the year when nobody should be alone. Yet here he was, a 42-year-old man who had everything the world said mattered, and absolutely nothing that actually did. Robert had specifically chosen Romano's because it was far from his office, far from his empty penthouse apartment, and far from anywhere he might run into someone who knew him. The last thing he wanted was pity from a business associate, or awkward small talk with an acquaintance who would wonder why the great Robert Chen was eating alone on Christmas Eve. The waiter had given him that look when he arrived. You know the one. That quick flash of sympathy mixed with discomfort. The kind of look that says, "Oh, you poor soul," without using any words at all. Robert had smiled tightly and requested the corner booth, the one partially hidden by a decorative wine rack. At least here he could pretend to be checking important emails. At least here people might think he was just waiting for someone who was running late. But nobody was running late. Nobody was coming at all. He took a small bite of the veal. It was probably delicious. Romano's was known for their exceptional food, but it tasted like cardboard in his mouth. Everything tasted like cardboard these days. His phone buzzed. Robert's heart actually jumped for a moment before he looked at the screen. Just another automated message. Season's greetings from the team at Pacific Investors. He swiped it away and set the phone face down on the table. 10 years ago, his phone would have been ringing off the hook on Christmas Eve. His wife would have been calling to confirm what time he'd be home. His college buddies would have been texting about their annual holiday get-together. His parents would have left 3 voicemails reminding him to drive safely and asking if he needed them to save him some of his mother's famous honey-glazed ham. But 10 years changes everything. His wife was gone. The divorce had been finalized 3 years ago, though the marriage had really ended long before that. She told him she felt like a stranger in her own home, that she was tired of being married to a ghost who only appeared long enough to sleep and shower. He'd promised to change, to work less, to be present. But the promises were as empty as his calendar tonight. She'd moved to Seattle with her new husband, a high school teacher who was home every day by 4 and coached Little League on weekends. His college buddies had stopped inviting him to things 5 years ago, after he'd canceled on them for the dozenth time. There were only so many "sorry guys, big presentation tomorrow" texts a friendship could survive. He'd told himself it didn't matter, that he was too busy building an empire to worry about beer and basketball with people who'd peaked in their 20s. His parents. God, his parents. His father had died 4 years ago, his mother 2 years after that. And Robert had missed so much of their final years. He'd been in Singapore when his father had his first heart attack. He'd been closing a deal in London when his mother got her cancer diagnosis. He'd made it to some hospital visits, some doctor appointments. But mostly he'd sent checks and hired nurses and told himself that providing the best medical care was the same thing as being there. It wasn't. Robert pushed his plate away and reached for his wine glass. The Cabernet was probably excellent too. He wouldn't know. He drank it like water, barely tasting it. The family at the nearest table burst into laughter. Robert glanced over despite himself. A father was wearing a Santa hat that his young daughter had apparently decorated with glitter and stickers. The man was making exaggerated ho-ho-ho sounds while his wife tried to take a photo, laughing so hard she could barely hold the camera steady. Their teenage son was rolling his eyes but smiling, and an elderly woman who must have been someone's grandmother was clapping her hands with delight. Robert looked away quickly. The ache in his chest was physical now, like someone had reached in and squeezed his heart with both hands. He'd built a company worth over $1 billion. He had 3 homes, though he barely lived in any of them. His car cost more than most people's houses. He'd been featured in Forbes and Business Insider, in every major publication that mattered. He'd given TED Talks about innovation and leadership. He'd won awards with his name engraved on crystal that sat in his office collecting dust, and he was eating veal that tasted like cardboard in a restaurant corner on Christmas Eve, trying not to cry. The waiter appeared at his elbow. "How is everything, sir? Can I get you anything else?" "I'm fine," Robert lied, the way he'd been lying for years. "Just the check when you get a chance." "Of course, sir. And will you be having dessert?" "Our tiramisu is exceptional tonight." Robert almost said no, but what was he going to do, go home? Sit in his empty apartment and stare at the city lights? At least here there were people, even if none of them were his people. "Sure," he heard himself say. "The tiramisu sounds fine." The waiter nodded and disappeared. Robert pulled out his phone again, scrolling through old photos he should have deleted months ago. There was one from his wedding day, both of them so young and hopeful. There was one from his father's birthday 6 months before he died. There was one from a company party where he was surrounded by employees who smiled for the camera, but probably couldn't wait to get away from him. When had it all gone so wrong? When had he become this person? The tiramisu arrived, picture perfect with its layers of coffee-soaked ladyfingers and mascarpone cream, dusted with cocoa powder. Robert picked up his fork and just stared at it. He couldn't even remember the last time he'd enjoyed dessert. The last time he'd enjoyed anything, really. "Excuse me, mister?" The voice was small and clear, cutting through the restaurant noise like a bell. Robert looked up to find a little girl standing beside his table. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old, wearing a red velvet dress with white lace trim. Her dark hair was pulled back with a sparkly clip, and her brown eyes were looking at him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Yes," he managed. "Are you eating all by yourself?" The question was so direct, so innocent, that Robert didn't know how to answer. He glanced around for the girl's parents, hoping they'd come collect her before this got more awkward. Yeah," he finally said. "Yes, I am." The little girl's face crumpled with concern. Not pity, exactly. Something deeper. Something that looked like genuine sadness on his behalf. Then, before he could say anything else, she turned toward a nearby table and called out in a voice that carried across half the restaurant, "Mama, there's a man over here eating all alone. He looks really sad. Can he come eat with us? It's Christmas." Robert felt his face flush hot. Every person within earshot was now looking at him. This was exactly what he'd been trying to avoid. The pity, the attention, the reminder that he was alone on Christmas while everyone else had people who loved them. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of the embarrassment he anticipated, he felt something else entirely. His throat went tight. His eyes stung. Because when was the last time anyone had noticed he was sad? When was the last time anyone had cared enough to do anything about it? When was the last time anyone had invited him to anything at all? A woman was rushing over now, clearly the girl's mother, her face apologetic. Robert prepared himself to politely decline whatever was about to happen, to retreat back into his safe, lonely corner. He'd finish his tiramisu, pay his check, and go home to his empty apartment where he belonged. But as the woman reached his table and opened her mouth to speak, Robert caught sight of her eyes. And in them he saw something he hadn't seen directed at him in a very long time. Genuine kindness. The woman had kind eyes. That was the first thing Robert noticed. Not judgmental eyes, not pitying eyes, but genuinely kind ones. She was probably in her mid-30s, dressed simply but nicely in a navy blue dress, her dark hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. "I am so sorry," she said, gently taking her daughter's hand. "Lily, we talked about this. You can't just walk up to strangers in restaurants." "But Mama," the little girl protested, "he's all alone. On Christmas. Nobody should be alone on Christmas." "You always say that." The woman's cheeks flushed slightly. "I know, sweetheart, but this gentleman might prefer his privacy. Not everyone wants company." She looked at Robert with an apologetic smile, clearly expecting him to agree to let her off the hook, to go back to his corner booth and his lonely tiramisu. It was the perfect out. All he had to do was smile politely and say it was fine, no offense taken, Merry Christmas. But the words wouldn't come, because the little girl was right. Nobody should be alone on Christmas. And he was so tired of being alone. Robert started, then stopped. His voice came out rougher than he intended. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Actually, that's very kind of her. Of you both." The woman's expression shifted slightly. She was looking at him more closely now, and Robert had the uncomfortable feeling that she was seeing far more than he wanted her to see. There was something about her gaze that felt professional, like she was trained to read people. A teacher, maybe? A counselor? Are you sure? She asked gently. Because if you'd like to join us, we'd be happy to have you. We have plenty of room at our table, and honestly, we always order too much food anyway. Robert looked past her to the table she'd gestured toward. An elderly man with silver hair and warm brown skin was watching with interest. A teenage boy was studiously looking at his phone, clearly embarrassed by the whole situation. A woman about the mother's age was smiling encouragingly. They were a family. A real family. The kind of family Robert had once been part of, before he'd traded it all for conference calls and stock options. I don't want to intrude, he said, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were half-hearted. Lily squeezed her mother's hand. Please say yes, mister. We have tamales. Auntie Rosa made them herself, and they're the best tamales in the whole world. And Grandpa tells really funny stories. And Mama brought flan for dessert. And it's Christmas. The simple enthusiasm in her voice nearly broke him. When was the last time anyone had been excited to spend time with him? When was the last time someone had offered him homemade food and funny stories instead of business proposals and networking opportunities? Well, Robert heard himself say, I do like tamales. Lily's face lit up like he'd just told her Santa Claus was real. Yes, come on! Before Robert could change his mind, the little girl had grabbed his hand with the fearless confidence of childhood. Her small fingers were warm, and there was a sticky residue that was probably from candy or syrup. It was the most human contact Robert had experienced in months. Lily, let the gentleman get his things, her mother said. But she was smiling now, a real smile that reached her eyes. Robert grabbed his phone and wallet, leaving cash on the table to cover his bill and a generous tip. As he stood, he caught the waiter's eye. The man looked absolutely stunned, watching this strange scene unfold. Robert almost laughed. He was pretty stunned himself. Lily led him to the family's table like she'd just won a prize. Everyone, this is... She paused and looked up at him. What's your name, mister? Robert, he said. Robert Chen, this is Robert, Lily announced proudly. He was eating all alone, so I invited him to eat with us instead. Because it's Christmas and nobody should be alone on Christmas. The elderly man stood and extended his hand, his grip firm and warm. Well, Robert, it's very nice to meet you. I'm Miguel. This is my daughter Anna, my granddaughter Lily, my grandson Thomas, and my daughter Rosa. Robert shook hands with each of them, feeling increasingly awkward and grateful in equal measure. The teenage boy, Thomas, gave him a half-hearted nod, clearly mortified that his little sister had essentially adopted a random stranger. Rosa patted the empty chair next to her with a welcoming smile. Anna was watching him with that same assessing look, like she was trying to figure out his story. Please sit, Miguel said, gesturing to the chair they'd made space for. We were just about to toast. You're just in time. Robert sat down and immediately the table came alive around him. Rosa was pulling out containers from a large bag, filling the center of the table with homemade food that made his restaurant meal look sad and sterile. Tamales wrapped in corn husks, Spanish rice, refried beans, and some kind of salad with bright vegetables. The restaurant lets us bring our own food? Robert asked, surprised. Anna laughed. We ordered plenty from their menu too. But my husband Carlos, before he passed, he started this tradition. He said restaurant food is fine, but Christmas Eve dinner needs to have some home in it, some heart. So we always bring a few dishes from home to go with what we order. The owner knows us, and he doesn't mind. There was a brief shadow that passed over her face when she mentioned her husband, but it was followed by a warm smile. This was a woman who had known grief but hadn't let it destroy her. Carlos sounds like he was a wise man, Robert said softly. He was, Miguel said, pouring wine into Robert's glass. He understood what matters: family, tradition, love. Not all the fancy things the world tells us we need. Robert felt those words land like a punch to his gut. Because wasn't that exactly what he'd been chasing? All the fancy things? And where had it gotten him? Lily had climbed into the chair on his other side and was busy unwrapping a tamale. Do you have any kids, Robert? Lily, Anna said gently, remember what we talked about? Some questions are private. It's okay, Robert said, though his chest tightened. No, I don't have any children. Do you have a dog? Or a cat or a fish? Despite everything, Robert smiled. No pets either. What about a wife? Or a husband? Lily, what? You said I should be curious about people. Anna looked mortally embarrassed, but Robert found himself laughing for the first time in what felt like months. It was a rusty sound, unpracticed but real. "It's all right," he said. "I was married once, but not anymore." Lily nodded seriously like he'd just shared something very profound. "That's sad. Being alone is sad. That's why you look so sad in the corner." "Lily, enough," Anna said firmly, but she looked at Robert with sympathy. "I apologize. 6-year-olds have no filter." "No," Robert said quietly. "She's right. I was sad. I am sad." The honesty of his own words surprised him. When was the last time he'd admitted that out loud? When was the last time he'd admitted it to himself? Miguel raised his wine glass. "Well then, Robert, you have come to the right table. Because if there's one thing this family knows how to do, it's chase away sadness. At least for one night. To new friends and unexpected blessings." Everyone raised their glasses, even Thomas, who was drinking soda. "To new friends," they echoed. Robert lifted his glass and felt something crack open inside his chest. It wasn't a big crack, but it was enough to let a little bit of light in. As the family began passing dishes and filling his plate with food, Robert realized that nobody was asking him what he did for a living. Nobody was asking about his net worth or his business strategy or trying to get something from him. They were just being kind, just sharing their table and their food and their Christmas Eve. Rosa spooned extra rice onto his plate. "You're too thin," she declared. "You work too much, I can tell. Men who work too much forget to eat properly." Robert wanted to protest, but she wasn't wrong. He couldn't remember the last real meal he'd had. The last time he'd sat down and actually tasted his food instead of eating while reading. Emails or during back-to-back meetings. "Thank you," he said simply. Lily was chattering away about her Christmas pageant at school, where she'd played an angel and had forgotten her lines but made everyone laugh instead. Thomas was slowly warming up, asking Robert if he liked basketball when he noticed Robert's phone case had a Lakers logo. Miguel was telling a story about Christmas in Mexico when he was a boy. His hands animated as he described midnight mass in a tiny village church, and Anna was watching it all with quiet contentment, occasionally meeting Robert's eyes with a small smile that seemed to say, "See? This is what matters." The restaurant's noise faded into background. For the first time in years, Robert wasn't thinking about quarterly reports or market projections or the next big acquisition. He was eating tamales that tasted like someone's grandmother's love. He was laughing at stories. He was letting himself be part of something real. When Lily accidentally spilled her juice and started to cry, Robert found himself reaching for napkins without thinking, helping clean it up while Anna soothed her daughter with gentle words. When Thomas mentioned his interest in graphic design, Robert didn't launch into a speech about market opportunities. He just listened, really listened, as the boy showed him some artwork on his phone. As the evening wore on and other families began to leave, Miguel checked his watch. "We should start heading toward the church soon. Midnight Mass waits for no one." "You're going to midnight Mass?" Robert asked. "Every year," Anna said. "It's part of our tradition. Carlos never missed it, and neither do we." Robert hadn't been to church in years, not since his mother's funeral. But before he could think better of it, before his logical mind could list all the reasons why he should politely decline and head home, Lily grabbed his hand again. "Will you come with us?" she asked, those big brown eyes looking up at him with hope. "Please, it's really pretty and they sing nice songs. And Father Miguel gives out candy canes after." Anna started to tell her daughter not to pressure their guest, but Robert surprised himself. "I'd like that," he said, "if you don't mind the company." And as the Rodriguez family gathered their things and prepared to head to church, Robert Chen, who hadn't felt part of anything in years, followed them out into the cold Christmas Eve night, feeling like maybe, just maybe, something was beginning to shift. The church was small, nothing like the grand cathedral where Robert's parents used to take him as a child, with its soaring ceilings and stained glass windows that cost more than most houses. This was a humble neighborhood church, tucked between a laundromat and a corner grocery store, with a simple white cross above the door and Christmas lights strung along the roof. Inside it was warm and packed with people. Families squeezed into pews, children fidgeted in their Sunday best in the air, smelled like pine from the Christmas tree near the altar, and candle wax from dozens of votives flickering in red glass holders. Someone was playing guitar softly near the front, warming up for the service. Robert felt completely out of place in his expensive suit. Everyone else was dressed nicely, but there was a casual comfort here that his tailored jacket and designer shoes couldn't match. He stuck out like a diamond in a drawer full of genuine treasures, but Lily was still holding his hand, pulling him along behind her family as they found their usual spot near the middle. She patted the seat beside her, and Robert sat down on the worn wooden pew, feeling the smooth surface that hundreds of people had polished with their presence over the years. "This is where we always sit," Lily whispered loudly. "Daddy used to sit right there." She pointed to the spot where Thomas now sat, looking at his phone one last time before Anna gave him the mom look that meant put it away. "I bet he loved coming here with you," Robert said. Lily nodded seriously. "Mama says he's here anyway, just in a different way. I don't really get it, but it makes her feel better, so that's good." The simple wisdom of that statement hit Robert hard. The acceptance, the love. This little girl had lost her father, but she wasn't bitter or broken. She was still capable of inviting sad strangers to dinner, still able to find joy in Christmas Eve. What was Robert's excuse? The service began with the guitar player joined by a small choir. They weren't professionals. Some voices were stronger than others, and they didn't have perfect harmony, but there was something beautiful about it anyway. Something honest. They were singing because they wanted to, because it meant something, not because they were being paid or trying to impress anyone. Miguel had a deep bass voice that rumbled through the hymns. Rosa sang quietly but sweetly. Anna had a lovely alto that wavered a bit on the high notes but never stopped trying. Even Thomas mumbled along occasionally, though he mostly just stood there looking uncomfortable. And Lily sang with her whole heart. Not quite on key, not quite getting all the words right, but with such pure joy that Robert felt his eyes sting. He didn't know most of the songs. It had been too long, but on the ones he remembered from childhood he found his voice joining in. Rusty. Uncertain. But there. When they sat down for the readings, Lily leaned against his arm. Just naturally, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Like he was her uncle or family friend instead of a stranger she'd met 2 hours ago. The trust in that simple gesture made Robert's throat tight. The priest was an older man with kind eyes and a Spanish accent. Father Miguel, the same name as Anna's father. He talked about Mary and Joseph traveling to Bethlehem, how they'd been strangers in a strange place looking for somewhere to belong, how the innkeeper had seen their need and offered what space he could. How sometimes the greatest gifts we give are simply opening our doors and our hearts to those who need it most. Robert shifted uncomfortably. Was this sermon for him? Had Anna called ahead? But no, that was ridiculous. This was just what Christmas was about. Kindness to strangers, opening doors, offering space at the table, things he'd forgotten how to do. The priest talked about how easy it is to get lost in the world's definitions of success. To measure our worth in money and status and achievements, to build bigger barns to store our wealth while forgetting to build relationships that actually feed our souls. Robert felt like every word was aimed directly at his heart. Like somehow this priest he'd never met could see right into his empty penthouse and his empty calendar and his empty life. When the congregation stood to sing again, Robert had to focus on keeping his breathing steady. He wasn't going to cry in a church full of strangers. He wasn't. But then Lily took his hand again and he noticed her looking up at him with concern. "Are you okay?" she whispered. He nodded, not trusting his voice. "It's okay to be sad in church," she said matter-of-factly. "Mama cries here sometimes. She says it's because she feels close to Daddy here. Is that why you're sad? Are you missing someone?" Robert looked down at this impossibly perceptive child and realized she'd nailed it exactly. He was missing someone. He was missing lots of someones. He was missing his parents and his ex-wife and his old friends and the version of himself that used to know how to be happy. "Yeah," he managed. "I'm missing someone." Lily squeezed his hand. "That's okay. Missing people means you loved them. That's what Mama says," the service continued. Communion was offered, but Robert stayed seated, feeling too far removed from any kind of grace to take it. But he watched as the Rodriguez family went forward, Lily skipping slightly despite her mother's gentle reminding to walk properly in church. He watched Miguel accept the wafer with bowed head, Rosa cross herself before returning to the pew, Thomas shuffle through the ritual with teenage awkwardness but genuine respect. When Anna returned, she met Robert's eyes briefly. There was no judgment there, no question about why he hadn't joined them. Just a quiet understanding that wherever he was in his own journey, it was okay. The final blessing was given, and the priest invited everyone to the fellowship hall for coffee and pan dulce. As people began filing out, exchanging Merry Christmas greetings and hugs, Miguel turned to Robert. "There's a tradition in our family," he said. "After midnight mass, we go home and have hot chocolate. Carlos started it when the kids were little. He said Christmas Day should begin with something sweet." "It's really good hot chocolate," Lily chimed in, "with cinnamon and everything." "You're welcome to join us," Anna added. "I know it's late and you've already spent your whole evening with us, so please don't feel obligated. But if you'd like to continue the tradition with us, we'd love to have you." Robert should have said no. He'd already intruded on their family dinner and their church service. They'd been incredibly kind, but surely they wanted their private family time now. Surely he'd taken enough of their Christmas. But the thought of going back to his empty apartment, of spending the rest of Christmas Eve alone after experiencing this warmth, felt impossible. "Like going from color back to black and white, I'd really like that," he said. "If you're sure it's not an imposition." "The only imposition would be if you said no and left Lily sad on Christmas," Miguel said with a warm smile. "That little girl has decided you're part of tonight, and who are we to argue with her?" They walked to their cars, parked a few blocks away. Robert's Mercedes looked absurdly out of place next to Anna's 10-year-old Honda. He felt a flash of embarrassment at the obvious display of wealth, but no one commented on it. Rosa just asked if he knew how to get to their apartment and offered to have him follow them. The drive took 15 minutes through quiet streets decorated with Christmas lights. Robert followed the Honda through neighborhoods that got progressively more modest, past houses where lights blazed in windows, and he could glimpse families gathered in living rooms. This was what Christmas was supposed to look like. People together. People who mattered to each other. The apartment complex was older but well-maintained. Anna parked in her assigned spot, and Robert found a visitor space nearby. As he got out of his car, he hesitated. This was real. He was about to go into these people's home, cross a threshold from public kindness to private hospitality. "You coming?" Thomas called from the stairs. The teenager had actually waited for him. "Yeah," Robert said, locking his car. "I'm coming." The apartment was on the 3rd floor. It was small. 2 bedrooms, maybe 3 if you counted what was probably a converted closet. The furniture was mismatched but clean. Decorations covered every surface, clearly handmade over years of family traditions. A modest Christmas tree stood in the corner, surrounded by carefully wrapped presents. The walls were covered with photos. Robert found himself drawn to them while Anna went to the kitchen to make the hot chocolate. Carlos smiled from a dozen frames. Carlos holding baby Lily. Carlos teaching Thomas to ride a bike. Carlos and Anna on their wedding day, both of them looking impossibly young. Carlos with Miguel, arms around each other's shoulders. He was a good man, Miguel said quietly, coming to stand beside Robert. Worked hard. Loved harder. He was a paramedic. Spent his life helping people. What happened? Robert asked, then immediately regretted it. I'm sorry, that's too personal. Cancer, Miguel said simply. Pancreatic. He fought for 8 months, but it was aggressive. He died at home, in that bedroom there, surrounded by all of us. He made Anna promise that she wouldn't let grief destroy her, that she'd keep celebrating holidays and raising the kids and living a full life. That must have been incredibly hard. It was. It still is. But Anna is strong. She honors Carlos by living the way he wanted her to, by staying open to joy, by teaching the children to be kind like he was kind. Miguel paused. By inviting lonely strangers to share their Christmas. Robert met the older man's eyes. There was no accusation there, just gentle truth. Thank you, Robert said quietly, for letting me be here. I didn't realize how much I needed this until your granddaughter saw me sitting alone. Miguel smiled. Lily has a gift for seeing what people need. She gets that from her father. Carlos could always tell when someone was hurting, even when they tried to hide it. Anna called from the kitchen that hot chocolate was ready. They gathered in the small living room, mugs warming their hands. Lily insisted Robert sit in Daddy's chair, a worn recliner that was clearly the most comfortable seat in the house. As he settled into it, surrounded by this family who'd welcomed him with open hearts, Robert Chen began to understand what he'd been missing. It wasn't success. He had plenty of that. It wasn't money. He had more than he knew what to do with. What he'd been missing was this: connection, belonging, people who saw him as a person instead of a position, people who offered him hot chocolate with cinnamon instead of champagne and networking opportunities. What he'd been missing was a reason to be human, and as Christmas Day officially began in this humble apartment, with a little girl falling asleep against his shoulder, and her family sharing stories of Christmases past, Robert felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt like maybe, just maybe, he could find his way back to the person he used to be, the person he was supposed to be, the person he wanted to be. The hot chocolate was everything Lily had promised. Rich and sweet, with just the right amount of cinnamon and a hint of vanilla. Anna had topped it with whipped cream and a sprinkle of cocoa powder. Robert held the warm mug between his hands and realized he couldn't remember the last time someone had made him something. Actually made him something with their own hands because they wanted to. Lily had curled up against his side in the recliner, fighting sleep but losing the battle. Her mother had draped a blanket over her, given Robert an apologetic look, and he'd just shaken his head. It was fine. More than fine. The trust of this little girl, her willingness to simply exist beside him without wanting anything in return, was healing something in him he hadn't known was broken. "So, Robert," Miguel said from his spot on the couch, "what is it that you do? For work, I mean." It was the question Robert had been dreading all night. Because how did you explain that you were a tech CEO to a family that clearly lived modestly? How did you talk about billion-dollar valuations to people who shopped at discount grocery stores and drove decade-old cars? It felt obscene somehow. Wrong. "I work in technology," he said carefully. "I run a company that develops software." "Ah," Miguel nodded. "That's good work. Important work. Everything runs on technology now." Robert almost laughed at the simplicity of it. Miguel had no idea he was talking to someone who'd been featured on the cover of magazines, someone whose company name was known worldwide, and that anonymity felt like relief. "What about you?" Robert asked. "What did you do before you retired?" Miguel's face lit up. "I was a carpenter. 45 years. Started when I was 15, working with my uncle. I built houses, furniture, cabinets, anything from wood. I loved it. Still have my workshop in the basement of this building. The landlord lets me use it. My father made Lily's bed," Anna added softly, "and Thomas's desk, and our kitchen table. Things that last," Miguel said with quiet pride. "That's what I believed in. Not fast or cheap, but made to last, made with care." Robert thought about his own company. How many times had they pushed products out faster than they should have, cutting corners to beat competitors to market? How many times had planned obsolescence been part of the business model, ensuring customers would need to upgrade in a year or two? He'd called it smart business. Miguel would probably call it wasteful. "That's admirable," Robert said. "Building things that last. What about you?" Rosa asked. She'd been quiet most of the evening but seemed to be warming up. "Do you build things that last?" The question felt weighted, accusatory even though her tone was gentle. "I don't know," Robert admitted. "I build things that make money. Whether they last, I'm not sure I ever asked that question." Thomas looked up from his phone. "Is your company one of those ones that's always in the news? Like the big tech companies?" "Something like that. Do you like it?" the teenager asked. Running a big company? No one had asked Robert that in years. They asked if he was successful, if he was winning, if he was growing market share. But did he like it? "I used to," he said slowly, surprising himself with the honesty. "Or at least I thought I did. Now I'm not sure if I liked it or if I just liked winning." Anna was watching him with those perceptive eyes again. "There's a difference?" "A big one, I'm learning." "What changed?" she asked gently. Robert looked down at Lily, now fully asleep against him, her breathing deep and steady. "I think I'm just now realizing what I've given up to win, and I'm starting to wonder if the trade was worth it." The room was quiet for a moment. Not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. Rosa got up to refill hot chocolate mugs. Miguel adjusted his glasses and studied Robert like he was a piece of wood, trying to see the grain beneath the surface. "Can I tell you something?" Anna said, settling deeper into the couch. "And I don't mean this to be harsh, but as someone who works in hospice care, I've learned a few things about people and what matters." "You're a hospice nurse?" She nodded. For 12 years. I sit with people at the end of their lives. I hold their hands. I listen to their regrets and their wishes and their final words. That explained her ability to read people. She'd spent over a decade watching humans at their most vulnerable, most honest moment. And what have you learned? Robert asked, though part of him didn't want to know. I've never had a single patient tell me they wished they'd worked more, not once. But I've had hundreds tell me they wished they'd loved more, been present more, taken the vacation, made the phone call, showed up for the people who mattered. She paused. I've had successful people like you probably, cry in my arms because they'd built empires but had no one to leave them to. No one who really knew them. Robert felt like she'd reached into his chest and squeezed. Because wasn't that exactly where he was headed? Toward a hospital bed with no one holding his hand. Toward success that meant nothing because there was no one to share it with. Carlos knew he was dying. Anna continued, her voice steady but soft. He had 8 months after diagnosis. And do you know what he did with that time? He didn't work more. He didn't try to make more money or secure more things for us. He taught Thomas to shave. He read every single book in Lily's bookshelf to her twice. He sat with my father and recorded his stories, his memories of coming to this country. He wrote us each letters to open on important days he knew he'd miss. Her voice wavered slightly. He spent his final months making sure we felt loved. That's what he left us. Not money. Not things, love. Robert's eyes were burning now. He didn't try to hide it. I'm not trying to make you feel bad, Anna said. I'm just telling you what I've seen. People think they have time. They think they'll work hard now and connect later. But later doesn't always come. And even when it does, you can't get back the years you missed. You can't go back and show up for the moments that mattered. How do you know I haven't? Robert asked, though he already knew the answer. Because happy people don't sit alone in restaurants on Christmas Eve, she said simply. Fulfilled people don't have the kind of loneliness in their eyes that you had when Lily walked up to your table. I recognize pain, Robert. It's my job to recognize it. The truth of it settled over him like weight, like chains he'd been carrying for so long he'd forgotten they were there. My wife left me 3 years ago, he heard himself say. She said I was a ghost, that I was there but not there, that she felt lonelier married to me than she'd felt single. The words kept coming like a dam breaking. My parents died and I missed so much of their final years. I was always working, always promising I'd be there next time, but next time never came. My friends gave up on me. My own sister doesn't return my calls anymore. Why? Miguel asked gently. Because I chose wrong. Over and over again I chose wrong. I chose meetings over birthday parties. I chose deals over dinner. I chose success over everything else, and I told myself it was temporary. That once I reached the next level, the next milestone, then I'd slow down. Then I'd make time for life. He laughed bitterly. But there's always another level, another milestone. The finish line kept moving and I kept chasing it. And I didn't notice that I was running alone until I looked around and everyone was gone. Lily stirred in her sleep, and Robert automatically adjusted so she'd be more comfortable. The gesture wasn't lost on Anna. You're not a bad man, she said. You're just a lost one. How do I find my way back? The question came out raw, desperate. How do I fix this? Rosa spoke up from the kitchen doorway. Same way you got lost, one choice at a time. But choosing differently. It's not too late, Miguel added. It's never too late. I came to this country with nothing when I was 23. Couldn't speak English. Didn't know anyone. Had to build a whole life from scratch. You think that was easy? But I did it. One day at a time. One choice at a time. But I've burned so many bridges, Robert protested. I've hurt people. Let them down. They're not going to just forgive me because I suddenly decide I want to change. Maybe not all of them, Anna agreed. But some will. And you can build new bridges too. Meet new people. Create new relationships. It starts with being brave enough to show up. To be vulnerable. To admit you're lonely and you want something different. Like coming to dinner with strangers because a 6-year-old invited you, Thomas said, cracking a slight smile. Robert actually laughed. Yeah, like that. That took courage, Anna said. More than you probably realize. Powerful men don't usually accept help. They don't usually admit they need anything. But you did. That's a start. They talked for another hour. Robert told them about his childhood, his parents. The dreams he'd had before business school redirected him toward profit margins instead of purpose. They listened without judgment, asking questions that showed they were really hearing him. Miguel talked about the house he'd bought 20 years ago, how it wasn't much but it was his, and how he'd spent every weekend improving it with his own hands. Rosa talked about her job as a teacher, how little it paid but how much it mattered when a struggling kid finally understood something because she'd taken extra time. Thomas admitted he was scared about the future, about whether he could actually make it as an artist, but that his family supported him anyway. And Anna talked about Carlos, about the man who'd taught her that success wasn't a dollar amount but a life well lived. That legacy wasn't what you left behind but who you touched while you were here. By the time Robert looked at his watch, it was nearly 3 a.m. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "You've already given me so much of your Christmas." "It was our pleasure," Miguel said, standing to shake his hand. "You were good company." Anna carefully lifted the still sleeping Lily from Robert's side. The little girl stirred. "Is Robert leaving?" "Yes, sweetie. But maybe we'll see him again sometime." Lily's eyes opened. "Promise?" she asked, looking at Robert. "I promise," he said, and meant it. At the door, Anna handed him a small wrapped package. "Lily wrapped this earlier. She wanted you to have a Christmas present." "I can't accept this," Robert protested. "You already did," Anna smiled. "The moment you said yes to dinner." Walking to his car, Robert clutched the small gift. Inside his Mercedes, under the harsh dome light, he carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a handmade ornament, clearly crafted by a child's hands. It was a star made of popsicle sticks and covered in gold glitter, with "Friends Forever" written in crayon across the middle. Robert sat in his expensive car in the parking lot of a modest apartment complex at 3 a.m. on Christmas Day, holding a popsicle stick ornament, and cried. He cried for all the years he'd wasted, for all the moments he'd missed, for all the relationships he'd sacrificed on the altar of success. But he also cried with something that might have been hope. Because tonight, he'd been given a gift more valuable than any business deal. He'd been given a mirror that showed him who he'd become and a window that showed him who he could still be. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to change. Robert didn't go home that Christmas morning. He drove to his office instead. The building was empty, silent in that eerie way that commercial spaces get when no one's there. His footsteps echoed in the marble lobby as he took the elevator to the top floor. His office overlooked the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive art on the walls, awards and accolades displayed on shelves, a desk that cost more than some people made in a year. Everything screamed success, achievement, power, and suddenly it all looked hollow. He sat in his leather chair and pulled out his phone. 3 a.m, but he was done waiting for the right time. There never was a right time. There was only now. He called his sister, knowing it would go to voicemail. "Jen, it's Robert. I know you're not awake, and I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I've been a terrible brother. I missed your wedding because of a conference. I missed meeting your kids until they were 3 and 5. I forgot your birthday 4 years running. You have every right to be done with me." He paused, his throat tight. "But I'm calling because I spent tonight with a family who didn't know me and showed me more kindness in 6 hours than I've shown the people I'm supposed to love in 6 years. And I realized that I don't want to keep being this person. I want to be different. I want to be someone my sister would actually want in her life." His voice cracked. "I know I can't fix the past. But if you're willing to give me a chance, I'd like to try being a better brother. A real brother. I love you, Jen. I should have said it more. I'm saying it now." He hung up and immediately dialed another number before he could lose his nerve. The phone rang 4 times before a sleepy voice answered. "Hello, David? It's Robert Chen." There was a long pause. David Martinez had been his college roommate, his best friend for years, until Robert had canceled on him one too many times. "Robert? Do you know what time it is?" "I know, I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you I'm sorry. For all of it. For becoming someone who thought business was more important than friendship. For bailing on your bachelor party because of a merger. For missing your son's birth because I was in Tokyo. For being a terrible friend." Another pause. "Are you drunk?" "No, I'm just awake for the first time in a long time." Robert took a breath. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'd like to try being the friend I should have been. If you're willing. It's 3 a.m. on Christmas, man, I know, but I've been alone on Christmas for the last 3 years. And tonight a 6-year-old girl invited me to dinner with her family because she thought I looked sad. And she was right, I am sad. And I'm tired of being sad. I'm tired of being alone because I pushed everyone away. He could hear David's wife asking who was on the phone in the background. Listen, David said finally, I'm not going to lie. You hurt me, a lot. When you bailed on my bachelor party, I realized you weren't going to change. That your work would always come first. So I stopped trying. I understand. I don't blame you. But, David continued, I also know that people can change, if they want to badly enough. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you one chance. One, we're having a New Year's party. You're invited. If you show up, actually show up and not just make an appearance before running off to work, then we'll talk. We'll see if there's a friendship left to rebuild. I'll be there, Robert said immediately. We'll see. David's voice softened slightly. Get some sleep, Robert. And Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, David. Robert sat in his office as the city began to wake up outside his windows. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. He'd spent years watching sunrises from this office. Always working, always chasing the next deal, the next achievement. He pulled out his laptop and started typing. The email to his executive team was simple. Effective immediately, he was promoting his chief operating officer, Jennifer Wang, to CEO. He would remain as chairman of the board, but would no longer handle day-to-day operations. The company would be in excellent hands, probably better hands than his own. He was done being a workaholic. He was done sacrificing life for business. He scheduled the email to send after the holiday break and closed his laptop. Then he went home, hung Lily's ornament on the single branch he kept in his apartment that passed for a Christmas tree, and slept for the first time in months without checking his phone every hour. When he woke up that evening, he had a text from his sister. Come to dinner tomorrow night. The kids want to meet their uncle. Don't be late. Robert read it 3 times, tears blurring his vision. 3 words that meant everything. Don't be late. She was giving him a chance. The days after Christmas blurred together in the best way. Robert showed up to his sister's house with gifts he'd actually picked out himself, not had his assistant order. He met his niece and nephew properly, got down on the floor to play with their toys, listened to their stories. His sister watched him carefully at first, waiting for him to check his phone to make excuses to leave. But he didn't. He stayed for dinner, helped with dishes, and left only when the kids were going to bed. Who are you and what have you done with my brother? Jen asked at the door, but she was smiling. I'm trying to be the brother you deserve, Robert said simply. He showed up to David's New Year's party. Not only showed up, but stayed the whole night, laughing with old friends, apologizing for years of absence, and meaning it. Some people were skeptical. Some were willing to see if the change would stick. But David pulled him aside at midnight and said, This is a good start, man. Keep it up. But the most important thing Robert did was go back to that apartment complex. He showed up the following Saturday with a box of donuts and uncertainty. Anna answered the door looking surprised but pleased. Robert, come in, come in. Lily's been asking about you all week. The little girl appeared from the hallway and launched herself at him with a hug that nearly knocked him over. You came back. You promised and you came back. I always keep my promises, Robert said, and meant it. Over the next few months, Robert became a regular fixture in the Rodriguez family's life. But not as a benefactor or charity case, as a friend. He showed up for Thomas's art show at school, standing in a crowded gymnasium looking at teenage artwork and feeling genuinely proud when people praised the boy's talent. He helped Miguel in his workshop, learning to work with wood, understanding the patience and care it took to build something that would last. He attended Lily's dance recital, sitting between Anna and Rosa, cheering louder than anyone when the little girl stumbled through her routine, but finished with a brilliant smile. When Anna's car finally died beyond repair, Robert did offer help. But he didn't just buy her a car. He spent a Saturday with her at used car lots, helping her negotiate, running vehicle history reports, making sure she got something reliable that she could afford with her own money. She was proud when they drove away in a dependable Honda, and that pride mattered more than any gratitude for an expensive gift would have. Robert started a foundation, but he did it differently this way. He didn't just write checks. He got involved. He recruited Anna to help him understand what single parents actually needed, not what wealthy donors thought they needed. He hired Thomas part-time to design the foundation's website and marketing materials, paying him fairly and treating him like a professional. He brought Miguel in to teach woodworking classes to at-risk youth, paying him consultant rates because his knowledge and experience had value. He restructured his company not just in title, but in practice. He hired people smarter than him to handle the day-to-day operations and stepped back. He went to therapy. He read books about life instead of just business. He learned to cook, started exercising, joined a community group. Some of his former colleagues thought he'd lost his mind. Walking away from active leadership of a billion-dollar company? For what? To spend time with some family in a modest apartment? To build birdhouses with an old carpenter? It made no sense to them. But Robert understood now what they didn't. That all the money in the world couldn't buy what he'd found in that restaurant on Christmas Eve. Couldn't purchase what Lily had, offered with her simple question and generous heart connection, purpose, love. 6 months after that Christmas, Robert sat in Lily's apartment building courtyard for her 7th birthday party. It wasn't fancy. Paper plates and grocery store cake, folding chairs and decorations from the dollar store. But it was filled with people who genuinely cared about each other, neighbors who'd become friends. Kids running around with unsupervised joy, adults sharing food and conversation without any agenda except enjoying each other's company. Lily was wearing a birthday crown made of construction paper and glitter. She climbed into Robert's lap with the easy affection of a child who'd decided he belonged to her. "Did you make a wish when you blew out your candles?" he asked. "Yep, but I can't tell you or it won't come true." "That's how it works," he agreed. Anna sat down in the chair next to them holding a paper plate with cake. "You look happy," she observed. Robert thought about it. Really thought about it. 6 months ago, he'd been eating alone in a restaurant. So lonely he'd wanted to disappear. Now he was at a child's birthday party in a courtyard, wearing a silly party hat Lily had insisted he put on, surrounded by people who knew him not for his bank account but for who he was becoming. "I am happy," he said, and heard the surprise in his own voice. "I think I actually am." "Good," Anna said simply. "You deserve to be." Miguel walked over with his characteristic warm smile. "Robert, some of the fathers want to know if you'll play softball with us next week. We have a league, nothing serious, just fun." "I'd love to," Robert said. Thomas appeared holding his phone. "Hey Robert, I finished that design project we talked about." "Want to see?" "Absolutely." Rosa called from the food table that there was plenty of barbecue left if anyone wanted seconds. And in that moment, Robert Chen realized something profound. He'd spent years building an empire, acquiring wealth, chasing success. He'd measured his worth in dollars and deals and industry recognition, but none of it had ever made him feel the way he felt right now. Surrounded by people who weren't impressed by his resume but who valued his presence, who invited him to softball games and birthday parties not because of what he could give them, but because they enjoyed his company. Who had taught him that the most important question wasn't, "What do you do?" but "Who do you love and who loves you back?" Lily wiggled off his lap to go play with her friends. Before she ran off, she turned back and threw her arms around his neck one more time. "I'm glad I found you in that restaurant," she whispered. "You're not sad anymore." Robert hugged her tight. "I'm glad you found me too, sweetheart. You saved me." She pulled back with a serious expression. "I didn't save you. I just invited you to dinner. You saved yourself by saying yes." And with that wisdom that only children seem to possess, she skipped away to join her friends, leaving Robert to marvel at the simple truth of it. He had said yes. To dinner, to connection, to vulnerability, to change. He'd said yes to being seen as human instead of just successful. Yes to relationships that required time and effort and presence. Yes to a life measured in moments instead of money. As the evening stretched on and the party showed no signs of ending, as kids played and adults laughed and the simple joy of community filled the air, Robert pulled out his phone and looked at the work emails that had been piling up. There was a time when he would have spent the party answering them. Unable to disconnect, unable to be fully present. Instead, he turned off his phone completely and slipped it back into his pocket. Because he'd learned something invaluable. On that lonely Christmas Eve, something no business school could teach and no amount of success could buy, that life wasn't happening later, after the next deal or achievement or milestone. Life was happening right now. In birthday parties and softball games. In hot chocolate with cinnamon and handmade ornaments. In 7-year-olds who invited sad strangers to dinner because nobody should be alone on Christmas. And Robert Chen, who'd once been the loneliest successful man in the city, was finally, truly, living, all because a little girl had looked at him with compassionate eyes and asked a simple question that changed everything. "Do you want to have dinner with us?" And this time, for the first time in years, he'd given the right answer. Yes.